that are the real soul of this country. A great part of my life I've been climbing and fishing and hunting on public lands. I've been a successful businessman because of the lessons I learned in the outdoors. My business was built on having wild places. Public lands have never been more threatened than right now because you have a few self-serving politicians who want to sell them off and make money. Behind the politicians are the energy companies and the big corporations that want to use up those natural resources. It's just greed. This belongs to us. This belongs to all of the people in America. It's our heritage. I hope my kids and grandkids will have the same experiences that I have. Our Secretary of the Interior, Zinke, has said he believes in public lands. Let's hold him to it. Let's not let him back down on it.
From WBRN Radio in Boston on the Bostonred Network. We're doing a little different type of episode here, one that combines corporate responsibility with environmental and social justice action. We look at the outdoor supplier, Patagonia, which is named after a landmass down in the south of the American hemisphere. And its corporate leader there, Mr. Yvon Chouinard. He is a French-Canadian, and he founded Patagonia, which sells various types of camping supply, outdoors retailer. And what this retailer has done has taken on a different type of situation. In other words, REI and some others have been working on statements to preserve designations in the outdoors. Released this month, showing that outdoor recreation supports a 7.6 million sustainable American jobs, nearly 900 billion in consumer spending, and 125 billion in tax revenue. Patagonia's CEO is Rose Marcario. On Wednesday, took less of a conciliatory move here and said the White House has no such authority and is threatening legal action. Now, this comes out of the designation by DJ Trump of two national monuments, the Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument that was designated in 1996, and the Bears Eagle National Monument designated by President Barack Obama in 2016. And Trump asked for an interim report and a final report in 120 days. Patagonia shot across the bow this week and vowed to take the White House to court if needed, and was an unusual combative position for a retail business. When we came in, you heard the ad that they had put up on television, that they actually spent money to air the ad to the American people. And this is the first time a company that is a retail company, actually there are retail companies that donate to various MGOs. But what Patagonia has decided to do is actually do the work themselves, or some of the work, instead of, say, going to the Nature Conservancy or of organizations and just donating money to them. Now, a study here of policy communications from Global Strategies Group found that 84% of Americans believe that a business has a responsibility to bring a social change on important issues. 79% agree that a corporation can succeed at business while also taking a stance on important issues. 72% believe a stance on important issues can help a company's bottom line. It does indeed help a company's bottom line, a corporation's bottom line, if it's not just a window dressing, a period. There's no longer a disconnect, at least in the public mindset, between driving profits and doing good. Now, Google came out and with a little slogan, "Do no evil," but they've done a lot of evil. Tanya Merrick, partner and co-leader at the Global Strategies Group Corporation Impact Project, said in a statement emailed to This Is Retail Drive, where we're getting this information, incidentally, the incredible impact for companies' corporate social responsibility programs. Indeed, expect the Trump aides to increase the force of retailers to recognize that being political goes beyond issues like safety and oversight in factories, environmental sustainability, and human rights. Retailers futurist Doug Stevens told the Retail Dive earlier this year, "We live in a world where retailers are finding themselves having to become more politically responsive. As America is divided in what to make of the Trumps, it appears equally conflicted on how brands and retailers have choose to respond. Some consumers applaud moves by TJ Maxx, Starbucks, and Nordstrom. Others boycott the retailers." In other words, there's a two-side to it. Many organizations have become center point. The National Football League, the Kneel Down campaign, the campaign by the American hero, Mr. Kolopek, there, and his stood forward March for Social Justice, having been a quarterback with the 49ers, that is the NFL team in San Francisco. He has steadily led this and, of course, had been boycotted or blackballed by the NFL. But nonetheless, he received a Muhammad Ali Achievement Award from the wife of the late Muhammad Ali, the great boxer. So we are seeing a little things of light, as General Powell would say, the light's foundation and other things. But this is beyond that, where people are actually taking on the moves by the ultra-right Trump administration. And they're putting their money where their mouth is. Goner's ad, it cost them $700,000. They put it out there, and to counteract this operation by DJ Trump. When we finish our part here, you hear from Yvon Chouinard, mispronouncing his name, but nonetheless, it is French, Cardinal. Anyway, it is French, and he goes on to say here, more important though, the ad urges viewers to defend public lands as they are coming on the front. Public lands have never been more threatened right now. Cordier said in an ad, because you have a very few self-serving politicians who want to sell off and make money. What this is all about is short-term strategies. In business, you have long-term strategies, and you have short-term strategies. American business has always been basically about very short-term strategies. Now, occasionally these strategies turn in the case of GM and some of the others, of more of a long-term strategy, but there is plenty of opportunism in the business channel as there is in the political channel. And this is what you have in a modern industrial capitalist society. And we have seen the outcomes of those. You, of course, had the Great Depression, but that was when the country was moving from an agrarian society trying to move to a fully industrialized society. And then, of course, in 1982, under Ronald Reagan, you saw this business opportunism at its height. But it caused two severe recessions at that time. So part of the modern-day capitalist systems is that you have boom and bursts. Bubbles go up like balloons, and pins are stuck in them called arrogant. The economy as such. And thus you have these ups, you have these downs. People earn money. Let's say, for instance, the market's up 15 or 20%, and then it drops 10% or more. The pipelines that you see running across America that have been approved are leaking petroleum product, and that causes damage to the earth. This whole scheme of drilling, shell mining, strip mining, cutting down trees, etc., in national parks, etc., is a short-term strategy when you look at the overall 3,000 years or more of many of these parks. So what you have is, within a year or so, you can do damage that will take 100 years to attempt to correct. This is what the problem is. So right now you have a right-wing administration that rode into town with very, very low approval ratings. Today, G.J. Trump was talking about he won the Electoral College. He did indeed win the Electoral College, but by less than other presidents, and claim he would have won the popular vote had not been for illegal voting. That is not substantiated. It's unsubstantiated. And the problem what you have is here you have message, or a Trump propaganda, that is nothing more than propaganda. It's totally fake. It's based upon nothing. But when you have this out there, the factual situation will catch up with you. For instance, if you say, well, we'll cut taxes and this will generate 3.2 or 3.5% growth over a 10-year period. Utterly impossible to put that out there and it will pay for itself. It will not. All responsible studies say no. Well, what happens? We have to wait until 2018, 2019 to see what actually happens. And when things go south, these people will be nowhere to be found. Like Judge Moore in Alabama. You didn't see much of Judge these days. The race, incidentally, is tomorrow. But this whole situation here of corporations coming to the plate, the idea behind Patagonia, and of just telling people not to buy a jacket, because when you buy a jacket or buy anything, it goes into the ecosystem. In other words, if you throw it away, it goes to the trash. But they even have a unit that actually repairs some of the stuff that they sell. They have people employed just to do that. They're out of Ventura, California. And they have a consensus forum at their business. In 1988, when we went into something called Cranston Saltware, we established basically the same type of situation. We never made millions of dollars at it. We're not out there, but we decided what we would do is promote, at that time, an open software platform. We did not have Linux around. We were selling toolkits, basically, and something called shareware. But at the same time, to build a sustainable model over time. Then eventually we had Linux. Now we have hundreds, if not thousands, of open source projects around that various people in. Some are like Android that are partially open, not completely open, but we are moving from what is called open source to liberate software. In other words, software that is free. The Software Foundation in Boston has pioneered this, and we're moving in that direction as we're moving with most knowledge into open culture. We're becoming more and more often open with Wikipedia. We don't have to rely upon Encyclopedia Britannica, Funk and Wagner. Anyway, things that when we were as young people learning, Now this information is out there. You just have to find it, and we've been trying to democratize it. And as we democratize it, also there's an overflow into public spaces. In the U.S., it's what Teddy Roosevelt created, the national park system. That was created in the early 1900s, 100 years old. And these clowns were destroyed in 6 months. But this will go in and out as people become more aware of what is actually going on. So this is the crux of our program, Patagonia. Corporate responsibility is best. We'll figure out a title for this. Let's look at some of the other things here, and we'll do the sports. We won't spend too much time here. We'll go right now to the sports, to ESPN, and get the NBA sport in Chicago. Bulls 108-85. The Pelicans were in Houston. Rockets 132-123. The Heat at the Grizzlies. The Heat 107-82. The Hornets were at the Thunder. Hornets 107-82 for the Thunder. Oh, excuse me. The Heat was 107-82 to the Grizzlies. The Hornets 116-103 for the Thunder. We got the winners right. And the Portland Trailblazers were at the Warriors. 111 for the Warriors, 109 for the Trailblazers. The Raptors were at the Clippers in Los Angeles. Clippers 96-91. So that is some of the sport last night, and oh well. Anyway, we're not doing football, so we'll skip it. We were just looking at an old Bears. A quarterback here was able to perform. Anyway, nonetheless, you can check that out. The Alabama Senate campaign closes with a wave of out-of-state stars. This is from the Washington Post. President Barack Obama and Joe Biden are doing robocalling these days. For Jones, national leaders, Hollywood actress, retired football players. Charles Barkley got in that. Attracted more than $41 million in spending. That's a lot of money for a race in a place like Alabama. They even had to fool David Clark there. Well, he's a former sheriff in Milwaukee. I guess he's doing nothing now and walking around the streets. A win for Moore, in contrast, would weaken the hand of mainstream Republicans who have struggled to broaden the appeal of the party. Well, old man McConnell will have some problems. Condoleezza Rice, a Republican who was from Alabama, released a statement encouraging people to vote and seemed to rebuke Roy Moore. But she stopped short of names, in which she's playing both sides of the middle. Meanwhile, a Republican National Committee type from Nebraska, Joyce Simmons, announced that she had resigned her post in protest of the party's continual support of Roy Moore. Richard Selby, who voted for writing candidate, said Sunday that he found Moore's accusers to be believable and that Moore would not represent the state well. The Secretary of State there, Merritt, we reported this last night, expects, it was 20 to 25. Now he's raised the number actually to 25. It could be as much as 30%. An automatic poll from Emerson College gives Moore a 9-point lead. And the Fox News poll of all things give Mr. Jones a 10-point lead. And the Monmouth University poll has it dead even. I'm hearing something said Brian Walsh. He's president of American First, an outside group that spent $1.1 million on a mail and TV and digital support. More, no one knows what the hell's going on right now. Well, That is kind of a situation you don't want to be if you're a Roy Moore, because, first of all, Roy Moore is well known. Everybody in Alabama knows Roy Moore. And the Republican Party begrudgingly have put their whole machine behind Roy Moore. DJ Trump himself basically is campaigning for more, robocalling for more, and they don't know where it is. Giles Perkins, the chair of Jones' campaign, said about 30 different calls have gone out to voters, and most of them are local. And no doubt, Moore as Jones, has a very good organization. Moore has not held a campaign event since the 5th of December, spoke in Midland City, Alabama, explaining why he didn't campaign this week. He told the crowd, "I'm approximately 2.5 days to take my wife out of this mess and relax with my son at West Point." He had a son at West Point. So, in other words, he was in a flag-draped barn. What they are doing to Judge Moore, they are going to try to do to every Trump supporter running next year. That is from Corey Stewart, Prince William County supervisor, who's running for the Republican nomination against, he can forget that, against Tim Kaine. Bannon, meanwhile, made his first trip there to Alabama, drew boos when he mentioned Selby and little Bobby Coker, referring to the senator from Tennessee. Suggested, I don't know why he's calling somebody little, he's not very big himself, as soon as they get that tax cut. Even he took an appearance shot at Ivanka Trump, who criticized Moore. There's a special place in hell for Republicans who should know better, he said, reworking a comment that Ivanka Trump had made about the misconduct allegations against Roy Moore. Doug Jones is focused on turning out the followers of O.J. Simpson. So he had Charles Bartley there. Charles Bartley, of course, is played for Auburn, is from Alabama. And the city's new elected mayor, that's Randall Wolfling. He's of Birmingham. They have a new mayor there. Trump campaigned for Moore over the weekend, and he did, but he sort of had to hide out a little bit. Went to the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, slipped in the back door and out the side door. Review of records by Issue 1, a group that monitors spending, found that, again, back to the $41.5 million spent in just a special election. Had they given it out to every person in Alabama, they would probably have $100 more Santa Claus present. Let me just go very, very quickly here to Alabama.com. He was even there. This is Steve Bannon, marking Joe Scarborough, who has graduated from the University of Alabama, whereas this Bannon character actually was at Yale and Harvard. Moore himself, of course, attended the University of Alabama's law school. Scarborough, he went to much better schools. This is Bannon, Georgetown, and Harvard. That's a crazy thing to say if you're in Alabama. I don't quite understand that one. We've already went over that, and there's also an order out here to maintain the records. A judge directed Alabama officials Monday to preserve all digital images on Tuesday's hotly contested special election. An order granting a preliminary injunction was filed on Monday, less than 24 hours before the voting begins. What that basically means is, this is by Roman Ashley, that you have a very good chance to prevail at a trial. Priscilla Duncan, an attorney for the plaintiffs, applauded the order. The images need to be preserved at least 6 months under the statute, Duncan said. They are being told at this point to preserve all digital records. And Merritt, who is the Secretary of State, had no comment, but they should preserve this. And this should happen in all elections. The Homeland Security had notified Alabama as one of 21 states that they could have possibly been hacked. There, of course, there's no evidence of Alabama being hacked, period. This ends our episode, and we go on to Mr. Chouinard. And I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name. I have to look at it every time. But anyway, it's Patagonia is the name of the organization here. And I think I had actually saw one of their ads for the jacket you didn't know. Yvon Chouinard. Anyway, Mr. Chouinard, he's in his late 70s, or perhaps he's in his 80s now. And he has formed a miracle company. Let's let you hear just a little bit of this. And
from the Commonwealth Club of California, I'm Greg Dalton, and this is Climate One, leading the conversation about America's energy, economy, and environment. On the show today, we're going on an adventure with the legendary explorer and entrepreneur Yvon Chouinard, the pioneering founder.
Okay, now we got Mr. Chouinard straight there, and this will do it for us from WBRN Radio in Boston on the 12th of December 2017. Good day, and if you're in the state of Alabama, go vote for Doug Jones. And you can let Roy ride his horse. He'll be busy doing that. He said he wanted to take a break, so he'll take a break. Good day.
Else is at the dance. You're in the river chasing frogs.
Yeah, I was never a dancer, actually.
And you also spent time going to, I guess you were 8 years old or so, going to the golf course, fishing. You were what we call today a free-range kid.
Yeah, my whole childhood was in nature, really. And yeah, probably when I was about 8 or so, before the other kids could cross the street, I was riding a bicycle over from Burbank to Toluca Lake and sneaking on Bob Hope's golf course bass pond and catching, hiding in the reeds and catching bass. So yeah, my whole life has been around nature, really.
Well, in 1968, you took a trip that you say shaped your life. You drove a 10,000-mile trip down the Pan American Highway. It was dirt then. So tell us about that trip and how it shaped your life.
Well, I've been on a lot of different expeditions and trips, but the longer they are, the more you get something out of them. And this was a 6-month trip. And so we left Ventura, California with an old van. This was Doug Tompkins and myself and some other folks. And we loaded the van up with surfboards and skis and climbing equipment, bought an old Bolex 16mm camera, and took off surfing all the way down to Lima, went to Chile, and climbed volcanoes and skied down them. That's where I learned to ski. Crossed over the Andes and went over and climbed Fitzroy, a real famous mountain that had been only climbed twice. And we did a new route on it. And we made a film on the whole thing. And that's when I fell in love with that country, the southern end of South America called Patagonia. And it affected Doug Tompkins a lot, and myself, and that's why I named my clothing company Patagonia, because I wanted to make clothing for those kind of conditions, like Cape Horn and wild mountains and wild weather, and I've that was a big effect. That was 1968. And it was a wild trip. I mean, you wake up sometimes sleeping on the ground in Guatemala with guns at your head. Had a lot of adventures.
We have a question from Facebook. Michael Cannell asks, what's cat food taste like? There's a religion that you ate some interesting things on that trip or other times in your life.
No, that was, when I was about 18 years old, I was spend the whole summers climbing, and we had no money whatsoever. I was living on maybe 50 cents a day. And before I left for the summer, I went to a place in San Francisco that sold dented cans. And I bought a couple of cases of dented cat food. It's not very tasty, no, but it's not dog food.
No offense to the dog owners. So you founded an outdoor gear company, you got into clothing, and at some point you realized that you were running a business, but you didn't want to be a businessman.
Well, I never wanted to be a businessman. I was a craftsman, and I was a climber, and every time I'd go into the mountains, I'd have ideas on how to make the gear better. The gear was pretty crude in those days. It was all made in Europe, and so I just got myself a forge and an anvil and a book on blacksmithing, and I taught myself how to blacksmith, and that led to making these pitons and eventually ice axes and crampons and all the gear for mountain climbing, and never did it thinking that it was a business. It was at first it was just making the stuff for myself and friends, and then friends of friends, and pretty soon I'm making 2 of these pitons an hour and selling them for $1.50 each. Well, not too profitable, right? But I kind of backdoored becoming a businessman, because this is in the '60s, and businessmen were all greaseballs in the '60s. This is a counterculture that we were in, and we didn't respect business. In fact, they were the enemy. And so, one day later on, I kind of woke up and discovered, oh my God, I am a businessman. And that's when I decided I better find out what I'm doing, and started reading a lot of books on business, and basically trying to create a business that we wanted to come to work in. All of us, it wasn't just me, but all of us were all dirtbags. And so that's what we did.
And explain that term. Dirtbags has a particular meaning for people who...
Well, actually, that term dirtbag, now you hear it all the time, but it actually came from Yosemite. And I don't know where it came from, but I remember when we started using it.
People who are out in nature a lot. 1981, you had a near-death experience in an avalanche in China. One person died, others, you survived. Tell us about that near-death experience in 1981 in China.
I used to go on a lot of... I'm kind of a serial climber, I'd spend 2 years just climbing cracks. I'd spend 5 years just climbing big walls like in Yosemite. I spent years and years learning ice climbing, in fact, writing a book about it. And then I did a bunch of expedition climbing on, the Himalayas and Antarctica and places like that. And one trip to Tibet, there was 4 of us coming down from Camp 2 on this 25,000-foot peak, and we set off an avalanche, and we were roped up together, and we went over a 30-foot cliff. We went about 1,500 feet. Went over a 30-foot cliff, and the avalanche stopped, and we're trying to untangle ourselves from all the ropes and stuff, and we're thinking, oh my God, we're alive. And but the avalanche started again. And at that point, we knew that at just a few hundred feet below, there was a 300-foot cliff. So we knew we were dead. And we accepted the idea that we're dead. were going to die, and the avalanche stopped 30 foot from the cliff, and one of the guys had a broken neck, and he was dead. Another friend had a broken back. I had broken ribs and a concussion. I had no idea where I was. And it kind of changed my life in that I've had a lot of close calls, near-death experiences, but always afterwards you go around sniffing the flowers and being really happy to be alive and everything. But after that, all of us were deeply depressed for several months afterwards. And I've read stories about people that have kind of died and come back. And you resist coming back. And in fact, it's taught me that there's nothing to fear about death itself. It's pretty pleasant feeling. And since then, first of all, I really scared the heck out of my family, and I realized I don't want to do that again. I really cut back on that kind of climbing, but I also have an attitude that, when my time comes, I'm going to go out pretty peacefully.
We have another question from Facebook for Yvon Chouinard, founder and owner of Patagonia. Cameron DePetro asks, you said that an adventure isn't an adventure until something goes wrong. Do you still believe that to be true?
Yeah, I mean, every definition of adventure in the Webster's has risk, whether it's a financial venture or whatever. And adventure travel, that's a oxymoron. They make sure that you're not going to get into any trouble.
Sign those release forms.
Yeah. So, and, if you really search out adventure, you have to purposely leave out some gear, or you have to purposely stick your neck out. Otherwise, you're not going to have an adventure. If you figure it out to the nth degree, it's not going to happen. And we searched out adventure when I was a kid. We always dared it to happen, so we could fight our way out of it. And that's when you get the most value out of the experience.
Do you feel that about your own children having adventure too?
Of course not. I want them to be as safe as possible. I don't want to hear about it.
Fair enough.
And in fact, the first time my parents knew I was a climber, this is 1964, they were watching television, and on the news program, there's a helicopter coming by the North American wall of El Capitan, and then it zooms in on these guys hanging from hammocks underneath this big overhang, 2,000 feet up, and one of them is their son. They always thought when I said I was going climbing that I was going hiking.
So what was it like when you got home when they found out about that?
They were aghast, that's for sure.
10 years after that avalanche in China, your company had a near-death experience. Why did that happen, and how did you turn it around?
Well, we were growing our business in the normal ways. We were adding more wholesale accounts. We were building more retail stores. And the market wanted our products, and so we were growing 50% a year. And, you can't grow a business with 50% growth year after year on retained earnings. At some point, you're going to crash. And at the same time, there was a recession, and the banks wouldn't lend us any money. We had bought inventory for another 50% growth, and as it turned out, we only had a 30% growth. Well, that's a huge difference. And we got into really deep financial trouble. I mean, so deep that I couldn't I could hardly get out of it. My accountants introduced me to the mafia. who ironically wanted 28% interest, which is what you pay on your credit cards now.
Yeah.
That's mafia. And, I finally got out of it by borrowing money from friends and friends of friends and stuff like that. But it also was a wake-up call that I was doing business just like everybody else. I was growing for the sake of growing and not thinking about what I was doing, and that forced us to sit down, all of us in the company, and ask ourselves, why are we in business? And in fact, I took all the most important people in the company, we went down to Patagonia, and we walked around in the wilderness, and we sit down for 3-4 hours a day and talk about, okay, why are we in business? What are we trying to do? What are our values? And that's what eventually became this book, Let My People Go Surfing, and it changed the whole way we did business. And what we did is create a business that we wanted to come to work in, and it's pretty different from a lot of other companies, I can tell you that, and it works.
Lots of companies talk about their values. They have them posted by the water cooler, et cetera, but it's a different thing to live them. So how do you operationalize them, and do you go back to them, keep coming back to them? Because all CEOs and companies say they have values.
Well, for instance, our management, the name of my book is Let My People Go Surfing, because we have a policy that if your child is sick, go home, take care of them, no matter what. And I don't care when you work, as long as the job gets done. And if the surf comes up, drop everything, go surfing if you're a surfer. If you have to wait till next Thursday at 2 o'clock to go surfing, you're, like Trump would say, you're a loser. But so, none of us liked authority. We really disliked authority, and none of us wanted to tell other people what to do. So our management system is kind of like an ant colony. An ant colony doesn't have any bosses. The queen just lays there and lays eggs. There's no bosses in ant colony, but every single ant knows what his job is and gets it done. And they communicate by touching feelers, and that's about it. And so in Native American societies, the chief was not the richest guy in the tribe. He was the best orator because the tribe made decisions on consensus. Now that's the opposite of how our government works. Our government works on compromise, which never solves the problem. It cuts the baby in half, so to speak. And to build consensus, you have to have leaders that can convince everybody that we're going to go in this direction. And it's kind of like a SEAL team. If one guy in the SEAL team says, I don't know about this thing we're going on, I think I'm going to just hold back a little bit. It doesn't work. Every single person in that SEAL team has to agree this is what he's going to do. And if the leader gets killed, the next guy takes over. If he gets killed, the next guy takes over. It's leaderless, really. And that's our management style. And so I hire very independent, very self-motivated people who believe in what we're trying to do, and I leave them alone. And in fact, I had a psychologist came one time and studied our company and said, gee, I got to tell you, we did psychological profiles on a lot of people, to see make sure the right brain people were working on right brain jobs and stuff like that. But I said, I got to tell you, your people are the most independent people I've ever seen in a company. In fact, they're really unemployable anywhere else.
It's a good thing you gave them jobs. If you're just joining us, our guest today at Climate One from the Commonwealth Club is Yvon Chouinard, the owner and founder of Patagonia. I'm Greg Dalton. We have another question from Facebook from Ryan Parker, who asks, which was a greater accomplishment, climbing El Capitan or founding 3 global companies?
Oh boy, those are really different. Yeah, it's only dawned on me recently the effect that my companies have had in society. I never really thought much about it, but we're a relatively small company, but we have incredible amount of social power around the world, and it's only dawned on me recently that we have this, and therefore we probably have the responsibility to use that power and not just hire other people to do the right thing and stuff. So it's changed the way our company operates. Instead of just giving money away to a bunch of NGOs, which we still do, but we're doing a lot more stuff ourselves. We're influencing. We're being asked to go to Washington almost every week now to give advice on dam removal, and in fact, Hilary is so sure that she's going to win, she's putting together her policy, and we're being asked to go back there in a week or two to talk. I mean, that's pretty amazing, and so I guess I'm pretty stoked about, the climbs I did on El Cap. They were really important for me at that time. It built the character that I am now, probably, but I'm starting to be pretty proud of the company, too.
A lot of moral authority, deep following that Patagonia has, and there was one time where you were approached by Walmart, which is a huge corporation, villainized by a lot of probably Patagonia followers. So tell us about Dancing with the Devil.
Well, a few years back, the Walton family told the CEO that they wanted a green Walmart, basically make it more environmentally responsible. Well, the CEO had no idea what that meant. So he sent a team of, I think, 7 or 9 people to Ventura to talk to us about what it means. And also, they realized that they couldn't do what they wanted to do without getting other large companies all together doing the same thing so that there was a level playing field. And so they sent a letter out to a lot of the largest companies in America to come to New York to talk about greening their companies and doing a new way of doing business and stuff, and nobody came. So they got a hold of us and said, will you co-sign a letter, Walmart and Patagonia, inviting these people to New York? And everybody came. So we started an sustainable apparel coalition, which is kind of bogged down in bureaucracy, but the ultimate goal is to basically give information to consumers so that they know what they're buying, so that a young person buying a pair of jeans can look at 5 pairs of jeans on a table and zap the barcode, and it'll tell them how each jean is made, and it'll have a grade as to which one is made more responsibly. That's the ultimate goal, and I don't know when that's going to happen, but...
Do you think that sustainable purchasing, green living, is that legitimate? Can corporations be a force for the sustainability changes that you want to see, or is that just greenwashing?
Well, it has to be forced by the consumer. I don't think corporations are going to change on their own. Public corporations, I mean, Robert Reich wrote a book on capitalism, and he devotes 2 chapters to why public corporations can never be responsible. But all of us here are no longer citizens, we're consumers. That's our brand now. But you know what? I used to think that maybe designers had the most power because they decide what color car you're going to drive, you know, what clothes you're going to wear and stuff. But you can just say no. That's pretty powerful. And so we have the power, and corporations will only change when we force them to. And it's the same thing with government. I'll tell you a little story about mountain guiding. There's two types of mountain guiding. One is democratic, where you're guiding somebody up the Grand Teton, which is a pretty safe mountain, the client starts freaking out, so you pull out your harmonica and you play your harmonica a little bit. You calm them down, and you kind of take your time and you get up it. Very effective way to guide on a non-difficult mountain. Let's say you're guiding on the Matterhorn, and you're 60 years old, a guide, and you got a family, and you remember the client is always out to kill you. And so on a mountain like that, it's rotten rock, it's thunderstorms every afternoon, and the client freaks out. The guide screams at him, pounds on him, calls him names, tugs the rope, and gets him to the top. So what happens is the client is more afraid of the guide than the mountain. And that's basically how we have to treat our government. The government won't move unless we tell them. In the debates, how many times did you hear global warming? Whew. Not at all. It was half of one sentence in Hilary's inauguration, not inauguration, but her acceptance speech.
If you're just joining us, we're talking today with Yvon